It's such a privilege to be here. I always think whenever you come and work with parents in educating your families, there's nothing more sacred or significant than that work, and nothing more challenging, right? And so how much we yearn to be helped and to help one another. I'm so happy to be here. I have to tell you, it's been a little bit of a stressful day, and I just came in here with the wrong shoes on, and my husband, I said, I've got to get the right shoes on, and he said, you've worn worse. And just a few weeks ago, we have two little ones, and it's very hard to leave home at night, especially or for any time, right? But leaving our little boy was next to impossible, and so in the stress of getting him he's 5 months old now, but getting him all ready, we got everybody out. Mike and I got the babysitter all taken care of, and then we got out to the car, and we got to the opera. He gave us tickets for Christmas, and so we've been looking forward to seeing this wonderful magic flute performance. If you haven't seen, just the opera itself is one of the most inspiring, and they aren't that inspiring. The music's beautiful, but there's not that many inspiring operas, I'll just be honest. And this is an absolutely beautiful opera. So we get to our parking spot, and he comes to open my door, and I look down, and I have my slippers on. And these are hilarious. These are Cabela's, like, hardcore slippers. These are not anything elegant or nice in the least. So there I trotted into the opera with slippers on, and anyway, knew that I was a mother of young children. So it's wonderful to be here, so I've got the right shoes on. I'd like to start. Today we are going to talk about creating a home of learning. And as you're thinking through all the many different curricula options, the different methods, the totally different ideas, I just want you to know that the way learning happens at home is through small, pretty ordinary things when it comes right down to it. And that you're guided, of course, to find answers in terms of curriculum and other things like that. And I sincerely believe that there's inspired curricula there. But it is you who's inspired in small and simple ways to enable learning to happen effectively at home. And that's a great thing. And so we're going to focus on the small things. And I just want to start by explaining a little bit about the power of the home and what we know from research about the power of home. And this will just be a background to getting into some of those ideas that help us in creating a home of learning, and hopefully will be helpful specifically to you. It's interesting that when you've often heard about the bell curve in terms of IQ, right? And that people are just sort of born into a place in the bell curve, and you're either on the high or the low or the middle end, and that's that. But what we know about IQ is that it's much more fluid than we had originally thought. And in fact, some research will actually say it's fluid, especially up until age 8. Isn't that interesting? That age 8 is kind of an important transformative year. But the things that seem to alter IQ are interesting. There's what we call non-environmental factors, and then there's environmental factors. When we say non-environmental factors, that would be things like how much nourishment they got in the womb, and how old the mother was when she gave birth, and how many siblings they have. And I'll just do a little caveat. I come from a family of 11 children, and researchers would suggest that by the end, the child was so dumb they couldn't do anything, right? And the truth is, in our family, the smartest are the last. But that research kind of holds up in terms of numbers of children, except when mothers have a bachelor's degree. And it looks like mothers who themselves have some education, it doesn't matter how many kids they have. But I think it has more to do with the mothers themselves being prepared and confident in what they are doing as mothers. That seems to make a difference. But there's just a group of non-environmental factors and environmental factors. And when we look at the environmental factors, one thing we know is that when parents are married, some people have estimated, for black children in particular, that there's an IQ increase of 10 points just from coming from married parents, which is interesting, isn't it? Something about a home that is stable and environmentally stable that way enables that child to develop brain-wise. But then there's all these other wonderful things that mothers do on a normal, ordinary basis, and fathers that help with IQ. Like, you've all done piggy wig, or counted toes, this little pig went to market, or talk to your baby as you're, cuckooing about diaper changing, and putting braids or colors in their hair, and talking to them about all those things matter. And we call them cognitive stimulation kinds of things, or social emotional stimulation things. Social emotional are the warmth and loving kinds of things that happen in a home. Just, I love you, and that's really powerful for brain development. And cognitive things are like, how many Cheerios do you see? And what color is that? And what is the name of that? Things that you very ordinarily do that are powerful for brain development. And so we're going to talk about some of those ordinary things with some other ideas. The other thing that we know is that the most consistent predictor of a child's development cognitively is what we call maternal sensitivity. That just means a mother's loving, responsive interactions with a baby. And that is the thing that is the most consistent predictor of their development on all kinds of levels. And mothers are not aware of how this is happening. We know, for example, that we can watch the brain of a baby develop just by this mother gazing into that child's eyes and talking to them or smiling at them. And you can actually watch synapses connect in the brain that allow that social, emotional side of the brain to be healthy. Very ordinary kinds of interactions that are powerful. When I got a master's in linguistics, and one of the most interesting things about teaching language development is that we know children cannot learn a language by watching on television. They can't. They can't just watch, or an iPad, right? You just can't learn a language that way in terms of your first language. And so researchers would say it's key that language development depends on a relationship. It has to emerge out of a relationship, almost as if that child learns that they mean something, they themselves mean something by how they feel in a relationship, and that the world around them also has meaning with labels to it, words. And so there's an important and powerful principle there. That is that learning itself is relational, which is why the home is so powerful. We know, for example, that there was a project called the Abecedarian Project done in the South some decades ago, and it went on, it's still going on probably, but testing these young adults. But what they did is they took children from very difficult homes, meaning they were low income, low education homes, and from their infancy, they brought them into high quality daycare centers all day, and they were in those settings for hours and hours and hours, and they had been in those settings, they were in those settings until they entered school, and then after they entered school, when they would leave school, they would still spend time in those centers, and it was very, very highly quality oriented. It was experts running it who were very educated, who did very highly stimulating activities, very warmth oriented, and what they found out is at the end of all of that, the IQ increase that was consistent over time was between 2 and 5 points. Millions of dollars invested in it. And we know that a home where there are married parents who are loving, it's at least 10 points and much higher, right? And so it just gives you a sense for the power of the home that cannot be replaced. It just simply can't be replaced. We'd be far better off by helping parents learn how to express love and learn how to express cognitively developmentally stimulating activities. That would be far more bang for our buck in a sense, because the home is so powerful. And the other thing that we know is that children who do well IQ-wise have had a lot of talking to them. You've probably heard some statistics that low-income homes, when they count the number of words a child hears in a day, over the course of 5 years would be millions of words different in terms of the numbers of words they had just heard. Because what happens often is when we haven't been talked to a lot ourselves and we become adults, then we talk to our children in command form. Go do that, be quiet, right? You hear that kind of thing in the grocery store sometimes, right? You're worried about that. Children who have that experience, well, there's very few words that those children actually hear, and very few dialogue, interactive kinds of expressions that would invite a return from that child in a conversation. And so over the course of 5 years, the numbers of words that they would hear that would help their brain to develop would be dramatically different. Hundreds of thousands and millions of words different. So one of the things you do is you talk a lot and you listen a lot. And talking and listening and discussing become really powerful forms of learning. But at the heart of it is this sense that learning is effective because it happens within relationships. It's powerful because it happens within relationships of love. These scholars come from Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and wrote a book about love. Interestingly enough, right? Scholars don't talk about love, But love is really important because it's the heart of a capacity to learn, in a sense. And so this is what they concluded. Whether they realize it or not, mothers use the universal signs of emotion to teach their babies about the world, and see that it has emotion to teach about the world. Emotions span the developmental chasm between mother and infant. Emotionality gives the two of them a common language, that language of love and care, years before the infant will acquire speech. And that's why this scholar, Daphne Marneff, says, academic development has something to do with the way parents' presence facilitates aspects of relating. Isn't that an interesting term? Not that parents, and she would say, not that they're holding up flashcards and memorizing a lot of things, although that can be a useful thing too, but the core of that is that there is a shared positive feeling, moral conversation. When we say moral conversation, we mean conversations about moral things, why that's right or that's wrong, or how it makes someone feel, relational kinds of conversations that themselves contribute to the child's development of a flexible and empathic approach to understanding the world, which in turn affects measurements of school readiness, self-control, and the like. And then she concludes with what a psychoanalyst from the 1800s said: in these matters, the answer is always that there is more to be gained from love than from education. And so I've heard this said better when someone says, we learn that the power of our influence is directly related to the power of love that a person feels from us. It's directly related to the degree to which this person feels my love. And if a child feels that kind of love and they grow up in that relationally healthy, emotionally healthy environment, their learning is dramatically enhanced. I've been thinking a lot about perfectionism. I don't know if any of you think about perfectionism or perfectionists or perfection or whatever, but I think it's pretty natural for parents to feel like, I'm going to give my child what? The best. I've got to get them the very best. And we want them to strive and to become, and we want them to work hard. And sometimes I think the challenge is that we will have two things become a problem. One is that we might see the actual achievement as the end goal, right? The high ACT score, or the high grade, or the scholarship, or the award that they receive, or some kind of accolade, that becomes the end goal. Or if we're wiser than that, and a lot of parents, right, a lot of us try to be wiser than that, we realize every child's different, they're all not going to get this score, and so that's not the end goal. So the end goal must be what? Whether they worked hard, right? And so sometimes we can think that then becomes the end goal, and it's a better end goal, I think, but it's still not the ultimate end goal. And so I just would challenge us to think, and I've been thinking a lot about this myself, that the end goal really is relationships. Relationship with God. We want to learn about His world. We want to learn about Him in all of these areas that He has revealed, because we want to draw closer to God Himself. He teaches us about science. He teaches us about math. He teaches us all those things that are revelatory of Him. We study music. It's great for brain development. It's great for skills. We study music not so we can get an award, or not even so much so that we can learn to work hard, though those are wonderful advantages, but so that we can have relationships in unique ways with the people we perform for or share music with, and with God Himself, who beautiful music is revealed in, right? And so I guess I've just been thinking a lot about this question when we're teaching and working with our children, or in our marriages or whatever else. If relationships and the strength of that relationship and people feeling loved and feeling love is the end goal, gratitude for God, gratitude for one another, and an appreciation of the glory of God and the glory of the individuals who are His children, we might ask, is what I'm feeling or doing taking me away from feeling close to God and this person, or is it causing me to feel closer to God and this person? And you all know, you've all probably participated in competitive things, whether it was music or whatever else, and you've known that when we make the end goal winning, or even did I really work hard, If that's the only end goal, it will not bring the joy that is promised if our end goal is a relationship of love and harmony through our performing, through our music, through our studies, through serving. And that's where a great deal of joy comes. And so having said that, we'll find out, I think, that relationships are built in far more ordinary ways than we think. And I get to teach a whole class at BYU, or was teaching every semester a class. The entire semester was focused on family work. How many of you ever do family work? Laundry, dishes, folding clothes, every single day, all day, right? And I just wanted to highlight the power of ordinary family work for teaching and learning. Here's a list of things that just highlight why it's really powerful for relationships. In fact, why we would read in Genesis when it says that God cursed the ground for our sake, not his, but our sake. It was a gift given, in a sense, by God, this work that we have to do every day to bind us together. It leaves us free in mind so that we can focus on one another while we're working, actually. We can talk while we're working. It's work that's unique that way. It dissolves feelings of hierarchy. In other words, when you want to have a difficult conversation with a child, one of the things that helps that a lot is come fold clothes with me, or come with me while I fold clothes, or come stand beside me in the sink and do the dishes beside me while we talk. And what we find out is that hierarchy is dissolved and we're on the same page, and so hearts can be open in unique ways. It's powerful because even a child can participate. Even a child with no intellectual capacity really can participate in family work and feel like they are offering something meaningful. It's an invitation over and over again to enter the family circle and a call to enact love. So that's why the title of this, we could say that this is the kind of work whereby love is made flesh. I think that's why mothers breastfeed and why they have hours and hours of feeding children and changing diapers and giving baths and all those things, wiping noses, right? Because that is whereby love is made flesh. That child comes to know they are cared and loved because of all those very ordinary, simple acts, and they are powerful in family life. You could say the same thing for hoeing in a garden or working together outside, doing anything. I have about a gazillion memories of my dad talking to me about different things while we were hoeing or while we were canning fruit. I remember particular being in China and I was teaching over there and asking a lot of questions about the Cultural Revolution and Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek, and the people that were with me said, "How do you know about that?" And I thought, oh yeah, that was before my time. That was in the 1950s and 60s. It was before I would have been born and been studying things. But guess who talked to me about them? My dad, my mom, while we were hoeing in the garden. He would end up sharing things, Dad in particular about China, Mom about other things that came out as we were working beside one another and planted themselves in my mind because they were told through stories. And then years later, I could draw on that information to learn more information. All of that is just to say you don't realize all that your children are learning through ordinary conversations that you're having while you're doing family work and other things. It's powerful teaching. And the great thing is, I think today, one of the great blessings is that we have access to information far more easily than my mom did. She kept a series of encyclopedia, 1976 encyclopedia set by our kitchen table. And I'll share this a little bit later, but every morning she would start by just sharing the events of that day in history. There's books you can get that just say, okay, it's March 12th, what happened on this day? And many times we didn't know about the people who had been born or that she was sharing about, or the event she was sharing about, and she wouldn't know either. And so she would go get that encyclopedia set and open it up, and while we were eating breakfast, she would share that with us. And I have many memories of walking around throughout the day, whether it was at school or I was on campus at BYU or whatever, and thinking about what she had shared that morning from that encyclopedia, the event that I hadn't known. And the reason it mattered was because it told me this day and the lives of the people who have touched this day are significant, which means I mean something also, that things mean something. Experiences and events and historical things, they mean something. And that gives meaning to my life as well. And so very ordinary things become powerful opportunities for storytelling and teaching. Now, how many of you remember the fall of the wall, the Berlin Wall? Easy to talk to your children about and share your feelings about that. Or I remember Mom talking a lot about the assassination of President Kennedy. I can talk to my children about the attempt on the life of Ronald Reagan. I remember that as a little girl. Lots of things, if we will think about it, historical things that can come up in very ordinary moments to teach powerful lessons, church history lessons and American history lessons. The home is a really natural and important setting. Some time ago, some researchers were working with ESL students, and they realized this interesting thing was happening. These ESL students would come into the classroom, they would sit in the back, they wouldn't participate, they acted like they didn't know the language, and it was hard for teachers to engage them very effectively. They were failing, in a sense, in these school settings. And the problem was, or the paradox was, that when they saw these young people at home, they were doing very complicated activities, getting their parents signed up for Social Security, helping their parents find work, engaging with insurance companies. I mean, complicated kinds of things that required language skills and abilities that other white children didn't manifest necessarily, that they could see these children doing at home. Why were they floundering in school? There's probably lots of reasons, but one of the things the researchers did is they recognized the home was unique, because in the home, the activities that you work on together are purposeful. Teachers try to synthesize that, don't they? In schools, they try to make a purposeful activity, and at home, you have a real problem to solve. The car's got to be fixed, or we've got to make lunch, or we've got to fix dinner, or we have to take care of getting this stain out of these clothing, and how are we going to do that? There's purposeful activities that are going on. And the second part of it is that they are done together with adults. And the ratio with which they're done is not 1 to 20 or 1 to 30, right? But it's 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. And so there's a lot of joint activities going on with parents that help children to learn more effectively. The other thing is what we call the zone of proximal development. And parents have this remarkable ability to know when their child is going to understand, for example, a vocabulary word, or they're not. And so they'll adjust the speech or adjust the complexity of the activity to be just above their level. Not too easy and not too hard, just in the right, what we would call zone of development. That is powerful, right? That's what teachers are. How can they do that for each child? That's the big challenge. But families and homes can do that. The other powerful thing is that they watch that parents have instructional conversations. In fact, at the dinner table, there's this interesting mix that happens that's linguistically really special. And we know that one of the few times of the day at the dinner setting usually, you'll have narrative kind of talk, which is storytelling, and you'll have instructional kind of conversation, which is more academic. And so, for example, a mom or a dad would talk about something that happened in the work setting, or they'd talk about something they read in the news, and it would involve instructional kind of language, usually vocabulary that's a little bit higher than what you would hear in normal storytelling. But that's mixed in with storytelling because the 7-year-old has a story to tell about whatever, right? And parents have stories to tell. And so you have this really interesting linguistic combination that is both instructional and narrative, and it's very effective for learning language and concepts for children. And then, of course, that learning is a pattern of living. You know, of course, in a school setting, when if someone's getting a snack or whatever, you just set it out there, right? Preschool, then you just set out the snack. Well, at home, it's never like that, right? We open up the fridge and there's no mayonnaise or there's no cheese, and so we've got to problem solve because now we've got to come up with something different to eat and convince this child that they want to eat it, right? Or they can convince mom otherwise. And so there's a lot of problem solving that's happening naturally in homes that is not synthetic. And so learning becomes a pattern of ordinary living. And then, of course, we know that rituals and routines matter. The gospel of Jesus Christ teaches us this way before. You can picture me in this group with scholars and them saying, what we need, these are not LDS people, what we need is a day a week when families would be home together in the evening. I'm like, bing! right? 1905, President Joseph F. Smith declaring that families should have family home evening, knowing that there would become a time when it would be hard for families to be home together at a certain time. Those rituals matter a lot. And we could think of rituals that happen on a daily basis in your homes, rituals like prayer and scripture study that come with the gospel, and other rituals that you create as a family, whether it's how you open your dinner or how you say goodnight, or whether you sing together at certain times of the day, how you do the dishes together. Those are rituals with a lot of emotionally symbolic meaning. You know they're emotionally symbolic because when you try to cancel any part of them for your 3-year-old, right? Try to change a nightly ritual for a 3-year-old, and you see how emotionally powerful those rituals are. And though a teenager will not communicate the same, you didn't sing to me or kiss me goodnight, it's the same meaning in a sense for them as well. Those rituals matter. It's not so much how they look. One of my sisters who works full-time is divorced and takes care of her family on her own. She'll say, I had to give up caring about how the dinner looked or tasted, but that it happened. The fact that it happened mattered, even if it was Little Caesar's $5 pizza on the way home, right? That those rituals, whether or not they happen, is far more important than how long they are or what they exactly look like. And this is just a list of how they matter for different ages. Adolescent age children, you probably know school age children, it matters a lot that they have consistent routines and rituals. They seem to develop the capacity to focus in learning when they've had rituals of learning at home, even if it was a brief scripture study together every day. Those patterns are important for language development, social development, problem solving, self-regulation. But adolescents, it's that same powerful thing, except we see it increased in terms of their sense of identity. So you've seen that study, the CASA report, they call it, Center for Addiction and Substance Abuse. It comes out every single year. And every year they say the same thing, that the single most consistent predictor of adolescents not engaging in high-risk behaviors, drugs and alcohol, are dinner. How many times they have dinner a week with their families. We know that that dinner measure is a measure of other things going on in the home, probably, and a consistency in rituals is really significant. Dinner seems to matter. Dinner seems to decrease depression, and it's really important. We know for decreasing depression among adolescents, something about that talking time. And so I just want to tell you, I guess, in concluding this section, that every moment is an opportunity for learning in your homes. And what that means, two things. It doesn't mean that you have to have a PhD to teach your children, right? Because what happens is that mothers who come home and are teaching their children, fathers who are teaching their children, will find that their desire for increased learning is dramatically increased after they become a parent. My mom would say, I didn't start learning until I started homeschooling. That's when my learning started. All of a sudden, she was learning about things she had never studied in college or had the interest in, right? And so it opens up a whole new world of learning for the family. So eating is powerful. I just mentioned already the events of the day, and you can pick up this little book that has the events of the day at Stevenson's Genealogy and Copy Center in Provo. But it really just lists each day and then gives a list of the things that happen. And what happens is children learn to connect a lot of dots together. The more we talk about things that have happened, then they connect. Dinner becomes an important time for listening to recordings or listening to music. That is when you can't talk very well, right? When you have a lot of young children and talking doesn't happen as effectively, maybe listening to the Suzuki tape. Dinner's a good time for that kind of thing to happen. Another powerful thing is to have maps. Maps are always engaging for young children, that interesting thing of finding out where in the world things happened and how vast and grand this world is. And so just putting maps where they are easily accessible, that's what allows those news events that happen, an event that happened in Libya, a scary or sad event that happened in Benghazi, we can point to those places and children can connect location, and then they can connect more information as they're studying those things. I remember when all of the difficult things were happening in the Balkan area and in Macedonia and Serbia. You remember the really difficult genocide and difficult things that were happening there. Who knew where the Balkans were, right? Until then. And then all of a sudden you can see this is the crossroads of Europe. Here's Western Europe. Here's Eastern Europe and all of Asia. No wonder this place has been in such turmoil for so many generations. It is the crossroads between those two vast continents, and a really significant place for the history of Islam and the history of Christianity, both. Right? And those are conversations, those are things that just happen because we hear the news, we identify it on a map on the table, and children start connecting a lot more things than we might ever imagine they are connecting. Discussion of current events. I think current events are powerful. When I was in homeschool, my mom had me read, it was U.S. News and World Report at that time, which I don't even know if it still exists, but she would say, I was probably 9 or 10, and she said, would you read an article every day and write a summary of it? That was pretty academic language for a little 9-year-old or 10-year-old, but I started to pick up a lot of things. And I knew it mattered because at dinner she would say, Jenet's going to share her report for these 5 minutes of the things that she learned by reading this article. I don't know that you would send your children to Time magazine for anything, but there's certainly other academic sources that can become stimulating conversation starters for dinner and other meals. Sleeping. Who knew that sleeping was a powerful time for learning? But how many of you have tried audio recordings when your children go to sleep, whether it's music or... It's a great time to learn. We spent a lot of years listening to the living scriptures, the history of the church and the New Testament. And I know a lot of history of the church stories because at night we would put in those tapes, they were cassette tapes then, and listen to those stories. And so you don't realize all that can be happening. I really appreciated Christian book distributors. They sell the Chronicles of Narnia and Anne of Green Gables and a whole lot of beautiful books done in an audio drama form. So they're very interesting to listen to, and they're powerful teaching tools. And those are things that children can just go to sleep to at night. And you wouldn't believe all the learning that's happening in those few minutes as they go to sleep. I've already talked about working together, but working in just ordinary settings is a powerful place for learning. And then, of course, family recreation, we need that too. And we know that children especially are advantaged by an experience that recreational psychologists have called flow. And flow means that it's challenging enough that it requires concentration, but it's not too challenging to be overwhelming. And when families work together at that kind of recreation, it bonds them. So you might think of putting up a tent could be a flow experience, especially for me, or all kinds of activities that you might think of that families ordinarily do, whether it's teaching children to swim, dads and moms doing that on their own, or going historical settings to visit. You get recreational experiences that require enough concentration. Could be doing a ropes course, right? Any of those things, requiring concentration but not overwhelming, and it's stimulating for both bonding and development. And then, of course, reading is powerful. It's funny that we don't actually have a lot of studies that show the power of reading on children's brain development, although we know language matters a lot and exposure matters a lot. But I think if psychologists could study what reading does to the heart of a child, we would see great power. We would see that when they hear the voice of their mother or their father reading, it means something different than when they just hear words. One of my brother-in-laws, my sister and brother-in-law moved into our house, or my parents' house when I was younger for a period of time, and they were kind of set aside in the corner. I'm so sorry, will you hang on to your thought and I'll come to you? We'll just finish this, sorry. And my mom would always sit at the top of the stairs, and all of our bedrooms were around that top of the stairs, and we would beg her to read, right? She read through the whole Work in the Glory series and Corrie ten Boom books and all of these wonderful books that we came to love. And that night she was reading, I think she was in Work in the Glory series at that time, and Emily, my married sister, came clear out of their corner area and said, "Mom, you've got to read a little louder. Gary can't hear you." This college pre-med student who was nearly to get into graduate school to go to medical school, he was desperate to hear my mom reading. There's something powerful about that. You probably wanted to add something.
You mentioned there's no study. There's a study on the brain, there's an almost like portion of the brain that children need to develop to be able to reason and function as adults. And that portion is where you hold your emotions and your feelings. So reading stories out loud and reading classical literature as kids and as they grow up helps to bridge that and become a functional, reasonable adult.
Thank you so much, because think of how powerful those settings are when you're reading to your child that lead to conversations that are, right, they're feeling something as they're hearing you, and they're feeling something truthful about what you're reading, right? And it becomes such a powerful teaching tool. I know of far few more effective, so thank you for adding that. Yeah. And then family traditions. You probably have been doing traditions for a long time, right? Birthday celebrations, and every 4th of July, the families get together and have a barbecue or whatever. I want to expand your view of what can happen in family traditions in terms of learning. And we know from Jewish history in particular that the Lord gives instructions in the Old Testament about exactly how Passover should be done, right? And it's interesting that he would care to give these careful instructions, I'm sure for lots of reasons. But one of the things that we learn from it is that there's this pattern. There's a pattern of family being together, history being taught, remembering, right? Passover is all about remembering, and all of the Jewish traditions really are about remembering. And food that's symbolic, and food is powerful for bonding. And so I would argue there's something really important about those 3 things together: family, remembering, and food. And sometimes the remembering is especially increased by music, but it's especially an important time for history telling. And so we just loved, you wouldn't believe the things that are told on Martin Luther King Day. We have a little gathering together as a family, and each family prepares some story having to do with civil rights or with human liberty throughout time, and they come and share that. And the beautiful things we learned about William Wilberforce, right? That remarkable man who gave his life to overcoming slavery in Britain, that then started the end of slavery all over the world. But how significant, how remarkable this man was. Equiano, the slave who told his story throughout England that became so powerful in causing people to be aflame with a recognition that this was important to get rid of. Those are all things that are stories that can be told that even a child can understand and love during events like as simple as Martin Luther King Day. And so rather than having it just be a whatever, make it meaningful, a meaningful time to remember and talk about significant stories. My husband's been so helpful with this. One of the things that he's done in our extended family is share stories I in particular appreciated about the civil rights movement, powerful stories of goodness and virtue from black members of our American history who suffered and who overcame through charitable and truthful ways. Remarkable models. And so not only is it remembering history, but it's building character by teaching and showing the virtues of those who've gone before. We could go on and on with great stories that you could tell. Talk about Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving should be a time to remember our pilgrim ancestors. We have forgotten them in our culture. And they had laid a foundation that is so important. They laid the foundation of those Puritan understandings that eventually led to the abolition of slavery, really. And so significant people that we can remember and tell stories. And that doesn't mean you have to know those stories already in your head. You can just get books out and read them on that day aloud, helping that day become a significant time of remembering. Music, and I've already commented a little bit about music, but music has great power, as you already know, for brain development and for bonding. So the music that we share one another, the music that I think you can't do enough singing, for example, during the day. Singing about whatever, making up songs. There's something that it lightens the mood in the family, it lightens the mood in the house, and is a powerful teaching tool. Mike and I have commented that in hearing adults talk, sometimes far more frequently than you might realize, we remember primary songs that teach us important truths, right, as adults. And there's so much instruction and learning going on through music, ordinary kinds of music. And then, of course, more sophisticated training in music can be powerful for the brain and for teaching concentration and other abilities. And then finally, I wanted to talk just a minute about traveling. My dad earned $30,000 a year at BYU as an accountant, and there were 11 children. We did not have a lot of money. But we had this very hideous camper that you can see in the image below. And it is a much loved, he painted it all white a couple of years ago. We now call it Moby Dick because it does in fact look like a great white whale. But I can't even tell you the countless memories that we have of going in that vehicle. I don't know that my husband and I could do that because neither of us could fix a car like that like my dad could on the way. But I learned something very important about the power of traveling to locations to learn. It matters. And any sacrifice, almost any sacrifice, is worth getting to places where historical things happen, for your children to stand in those sites, hear the words that were said as that first shot was fired there in Concord, Massachusetts, and standing on that bridge and feeling that feeling. There's nothing like that. Or looking up Bunker Hill, or walking on the red path through Boston, or standing in the place of Joseph Smith's birthplace in Vermont. It's a beautiful place, worth every sacrifice to stand there where that little cabin was, where that child was born who would change the world. Or going to Springfield, Illinois, to see the location of Lincoln's, where he's buried, and his wife, and seeing the museum there, and thinking about how significant his little home there, this place that he left and then never returned to because, of course, he was a martyr in a sense. Those are significant places of learning. One of my most poignant memories, we went to Mexico City, if you can imagine, not in this camper, we would never have made it, but in a very ugly old van, and lived there in Mexico City for a year. And during that time, while we were living there, we would have sometimes long drives, and Mom would read to us about the history of Mexico. She knew nothing about the history of Mexico before we went there, and I don't think any of us did. But I will never forget driving by the tree, this ancient old tree, where they said Cortez wept as he watched this destruction of Tenochtitlan that he had caused, Mexico City, this incredibly beautiful city where there was a lot of wicked things going on, no question, but a beautiful city with these boat, kind of gondola type travel method because of the water that was all around it. And as he watched that whole city just fall, and how he wept at that tree, I will never forget that. And I won't forget learning the history about that place that deepened my appreciation for the history of Mexico and its people. And it's because we saw it, right? It's because we went there that we cared about it. And so travel has great power. And making, even if it means, which it was for us, living on tuna fish and macaroni for 3 weeks, I really think, to make the sacrifices to stand in those places, it is worth that effort if you can do that. Or, and I said, even if it's just traveling by pictures. And the amazing thing today is you can get on YouTube and you can get an experience in Africa if you want, right? The other day, LaDonna and I were looking at elephants. I said, let's look on YouTube up some elephants. Saw this remarkable video of these elephant mothers coming and rescuing a baby elephant. I mean, we can travel to all kinds of places just remotely, in a sense, and it's significant. As we end in the next 10 minutes, I just want to conclude with what I think are the most important things. We've talked about a lot of ideas, and I hope you've had a sense for the power of the home, the power for very ordinary things becoming settings for learning. But I think most important, that this is so beautiful. I'll just quote Elder Bednar. The overarching purpose of Heavenly Father's great plan of happiness is to provide His spirit children with opportunities to what? To learn. It doesn't even say to be perfect. It isn't opportunities to be perfect. It's opportunities to learn. And His atoning sacrifices, He says, afforded to all of us a divine design plan whereby we could learn. Beautiful plan. The Lord cares very much about us asking questions. I recently heard Clayton Christensen. You've probably heard of Clayton Christensen. He is a Harvard business professor who's LDS and a wonderful person. But he was talking to someone who was not LDS about the gospel. And he said, I think the difference between my religion and yours, he said, is that Joseph Smith and the Restoration are all about asking questions. And it's as if before that time, in a sense, the lights were turned off in Europe. There was no opportunity to ask questions and get answers. And then, for reasons known to the Lord, it was the right time, and a young boy came and asked a question. And then he asked one question after another, and as he asked questions in humility and faith, the Lord could pour out learning. He wants us to ask questions. He wants us to learn. He wants us to grow. Anything less than that is damnation, which is what Satan's plan would be, to keep us from learning and from growing. President Brigham Young, the religion embraced by the Latter-day Saints, if only slightly understood, prompts them to search diligently after knowledge. There is no other people in existence more eager to see, hear, learn, and understand truth. And we should every day be coming into conflict with our own learning, in a sense, recognizing, oh, I have not understood things completely yet. And so the Lord wants me to learn some more things, whether it's patience, which is a daily thing, right, for mothers and fathers learning patience, but other things too. Our paradigm, I think, with the Boy Scout decision, I think there's a lot for us as members to learn about the Lord's desires for us. And when I say that, I think we have a lot to learn about the experience of same-sex attraction that we need to understand better and that we need to have more compassion with. And so it's almost like the Lord on a daily basis is enabling us to counter our own biases, if you will, and our own stopping points of learning, and inviting us to learn and ask over and over again more so that he can give us truth. And then, of course, this beautiful statement, the learning for which the church stands is the application of knowledge to the development of a noble and what? Godlike character. The learning doesn't stop here in the mind, but it is to be part of our hearts and our souls in enabling us to become Christ-like in character. And what a work that is. Do you feel like you work on that every day? And that is the end goal, is that we can become more like him, who is our model of character. And so I just want to end by sharing what we at American Heritage have found to be a powerful method for teaching that invites the development of Christ-like character. And just to recognize that if we want to develop Christ-like character, that will require Christ-like methods, right? If we believe there's an end goal that is Christ-like, then shouldn't the methods also themselves be Christ-like in a sense? And so all learning begins by asking inspired questions. That's what mothers and fathers, that is my challenge as a mother, and something I do not do naturally, but to invite and to create a home where we invite ourselves and our children to ask inspired questions, to seek learning by asking questions. And that asking questions drives the process of learning by reasoning and revelation, by both reasoning and revelation. And so I'm just going to end by giving you what we call the 4 R's of learning. And the first R is research. Research means, of course, fundamentally that we're studying the scriptures, right? And hopefully we're studying and listening and doing the best we can to know the truths of the Word of God all the time. So that when we do number 2, which is to study a source, whether it's reading a book to our children, whether it's studying math principles, or it's learning about how the structure of the cell works in biology, or how, in our case, LaDon's always wanting to hear about caterpillars becoming butterflies, right? That process, and spending time in a cocoon for 2 weeks. That in that searching, whatever it is that we're searching, that source of truth, there are principles of truth that can be learned from whatever we're studying. When you think about the remarkable way that the cell functions and how each part, the Golgi apparatus, the mitochondria, all of these different parts of the cell, the nucleus, each has a unique and specific role that it must fulfill in order for the whole cell to function. Are there principles in that? Powerful principles, right? About unity. Why a mother and a father? Why did God design marriage as a mother and a father? Because there is complementary characteristics that each brings to that relationship that could not be completed without the other. There's a wholeness in our unity. I love the words Paul, I was just reading the other day, the foot mattering and the eye mattering, and all of us being one part of the great Christian whole, in a sense. And can I say to the ear that we don't need you, or the eye that we don't need you, or that you're too different to fit in? No, we're all needed in that whole. Powerful principles that biology can teach us just in studying the structure of the cell. And I'm sure there's principles about caterpillars becoming butterflies, right? I am a caterpillar in the making, eating a lot, right? Growing, and hopefully we are all spending time in the things that will allow us to become what God intends us to become. There's beautiful principles that should be and can be extracted from all the learning that we're doing. That's what happens when we start researching. Reasoning is the process by which those principles are deduced. We would say it's the process of carefully considering, pondering, and questioning a subject area to identify how those principles of truth are illustrated. Reasoning the principles in each subject enables us to discern truth from error, to identify cause to effect, and observe the influence from internal to external. And we'll highlight each of those. Cause to effect. This is something dramatically missing from our world, right? There's a constant effort to eliminate the consequences of actions, or to pretend that they don't happen, to pretend that they aren't really there, to mask them somehow. How important it is that every principle really is revelational of a cause to effect relationship. That if this, then this happens. If we do this, this is the promise. Or by not doing this, this will follow. And how important that children learn that, in spite of what Hollywood would portray to us, right? That there are no consequences for certain actions. I once heard Karen Arneson, and she's a wonderful teacher in this area, but share that great literature will always teach us the truth, which is true cause to effect. It doesn't mean that great literature will always only have happy things in it, right? But it will teach us the truth about what happens, which is why Tolstoy's Anna Karenina is such a powerful book among many, many others, because what you see is the effect of a life not lived in virtue. And he illustrates it so beautifully. Internal to external. That our internal selves are the source of why we act the way we do, right? If there's a problem with our action, there's something internal that needs to be changed. You've often heard, what does a private life matter, right, to public life? We've heard that argument a lot. And we would say private life is everything. A person's internal life is everything. And that what we see on the outside is a manifestation of what we are in the inside. And how important to connect those two things. Relating, this is the third R. Relating means that we take those principles that we have researched and then reasoned out, and we relate them to our personal lives. And so a child, in learning the principles from which they're studying things, can then learn, oh, and I can pray for this, or I can seek this. I can apply this principle to my own life, either in developing it, or seeing it, or appreciating it in other people. Relating involves asking how one can see the principle working in his or her life and the lives of others, then trying to live and apply the principle in one's own life. Can you see how dinner conversations can change if we recognize that all the time we can be 4Ring as a family? Researching truth, reasoning the principle out, not the cultural idea that we might get out, but the principle. What is the underlying principle? Then applying it to our lives. And how that happens in all the conversations you have, whether it's taking kids to soccer and dropping them off and hearing about somebody at school, right? And the researching and the reasoning and the relating that happens, how powerful that is. The last R is what we call recording. And I think probably of all the church leaders, it's Elder Scott who's taught this so strongly, that we must write things down that we learn by the Spirit, he would say, right? Keeping a journal, writing them down and asking the Lord, is this what you wanted me to learn, or is there more? But recording can happen in so many different ways. It can happen in singing something or creating something that's a manifestation of that principle. It can happen in recording it and drawing a picture of it. But once we have learned it and recorded it, then we can say it is ours, right? Until that time, it hasn't yet become ours completely. But recording it becomes very important. As the last sentence says, the ultimate purpose of recording is that the learner may demonstrate the truth of the principle in his or her thoughts and actions. As the principle is recorded, it becomes etched in the character of the learner, which is what our end goal is, right? This etching of character, development of Christian character by applying, living the principles that we have learned. Well, I hope this last one is just a reminder that we get to celebrate learning. And one of the methods that's really important here at American Heritage School and in homeschools that use the principle-based approach is celebrating our learning, taking time to celebrate. Those holidays become important times for celebrating learning. Whether you've studied Pinocchio and you want to do Italian food and pretend that you're in Italy, right, and create in Italy, or you studied Heidi and you're in the Swiss Alps and learning about grandfather and that relationship, that special relationship, celebrating it through a memorable event is a significant part whereby the learning becomes part of us. I am so grateful for truths that teach us that God's purpose for us is to learn, that He rejoices in our learning, and that we can create homes where through the very ordinary patterns of everyday life that He has given to us, learning can become part of everything we do, this learning and growing that enables us to develop the kind of character that He would have us develop. So go forward in faith, right, in our efforts, sometimes weak efforts, to make learning a part of our everyday lives, character-building kind of learning. And I pray that you will be blessed in that effort and leave those thoughts with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.